Why is it that so many people feel anxious when they finally stop? You wake up and you're already thinking about what hasn't been done. You finish a task and your mind leaps to the next one, not because there's a deadline, but because the silence feels unbearable. You try to rest, but resting feels like breaking the rules, like you're doing something wrong, like you're falling behind, even when there's nothing chasing you. That's not productivity. That's psychological warfare. And this inner war between the part of you that craves rest and the part of you that punishes it is not a reflection of laziness or ambition. It's a symptom of something deeper, something older. The guilt of resting is not just about being busy. It's a byproduct of a self-concept that equates stillness with worthlessness. And that self-concept rarely comes from the present. It's not just about what you're doing. It's about who you think you have to be in order to be enough. For many, rest activates a deep internal conflict, a clash between two forces, the natural human need for restoration and the internalized voice that says, "You don't deserve it." But where does that voice come from? To answer that, we need to step into the architecture of the mind. In analytic psychology, especially in the framework of the psyche proposed by Jung and post-Freudian theorists, the human mind isn't a unified self. It's a system of parts, tensions, and projections. And in this system, one of the most powerful forces is the superego, the internalized authority that tells you what's acceptable, moral, and productive. But the superego isn't neutral. It's built from experience, from childhood, from the messages we absorbed, spoken or unspoken, about what it takes to be loved, to be safe, to be valuable. For some, that message was simple: be good, be useful, be impressive, or be invisible. That's the origin of the rest-guilt dynamic. When worth is attached to performance, rest isn't just inconvenient, it's a threat. Because if you're not producing, you're not proving. And if you're not proving, what are you? That question is terrifying to the ego. The ego, the conscious part of your identity, clings to roles, outcomes, and feedback. It wants to feel secure by controlling perception, so it aligns itself with the superego to keep the sense of worthiness intact. But here's the cost. Even when your body is exhausted, your mind won't allow a pause. Not because the work can't wait, but because your identity can't risk the stillness. Stillness invites reflection, and reflection reveals the emptiness behind the performance. So the psyche keeps moving, not because it's thriving, but because it's running from shame, running from the fear that beneath all the success and effort, there's nothing truly lovable. That's the heart of the guilt. And it's not rare. In fact, it's quietly embedded into many professional and cultural norms. The illusion that non-stop action equals discipline, or that rest is only earned after exhaustion, is deeply woven into the fabric of adult life. But beneath that illusion is a deeper distortion, the belief that you are only as good as your output. This belief is not just harmful, it's unsustainable. Because the truth is, no system, biological or psychological, can operate at full capacity indefinitely. Nature itself operates in cycles: expansion and contraction, action and rest, bloom and decay. When we disconnect from this rhythm, we disconnect from ourselves. But guilt doesn't care about rhythm. It cares about approval. And approval becomes the drug of the psyche addicted to external validation. This addiction is reinforced every time you override your exhaustion, push through burnout, or feel proud that you kept going despite your body asking you to stop. It's not that perseverance is wrong. It's that many confuse self-abandonment for strength. There's a difference between commitment and compulsion. One is grounded in choice, the other is driven by fear. And fear is a poor foundation for a life worth living. So if you've ever felt guilty for resting, that's not a flaw in your character. It's a signal from your unconscious, a sign that a part of you was taught, explicitly or implicitly, that love, value, and rest don't coexist. That needs to be examined, because guilt in this context is not a moral compass. It's a shadow. It's the echo of someone else's expectations now masquerading as your own conscience. When we begin to observe this guilt, not obey it, we create the space to understand it. And that understanding is the first fracture in the illusion that our value is conditional. Rest in its purest form is not lazy, it is radical, especially in a world that equates exhaustion with virtue. And here's the paradox. When we learn to rest without guilt, we become more grounded, not less driven. Because we're no longer running from something, we're moving towards something real. So the next time you feel that tension, the guilt for doing nothing, pause. Not to justify, not to fight it, but to notice it. That pause might be the most honest thing you've done all day. And that's where we begin. When you feel guilty for resting, it's not your adult mind that feels it first. It's the child inside you, the one who learned that safety came through performance. Every pattern of guilt begins as a blueprint, and this blueprint is drawn long before adulthood, long before careers, deadlines, or ambition. It's designed in the subtle moments of early life, when love and approval were given conditionally, when praise followed achievement, not existence, when silence followed failure, not understanding. This is how the mind learns to translate love into labor. In childhood, we're all wired to seek connection. Our nervous system is literally shaped by the emotional availability of the people around us. When connection feels unstable, the child's instinct is not to blame the parent, it's to adapt, to become who they need to be to keep love intact. That adaptation might look like obedience, or overachievement, or silence. It's not a conscious choice, it's survival. And survival leaves imprints, deep, invisible imprints that the adult self later mistakes for personality traits. I'm just disciplined. I can't sit still. I hate being unproductive. These are not preferences. They are echoes of early conditioning, signals that once said, if you slow down, you might lose everything that keeps you safe. Psychologically, this forms what's called conditional self-worth. It's a self-concept built not on being, but on doing. Every achievement becomes a temporary receipt for love. Every mistake, a potential eviction from belonging. This system works for a while, especially in environments that reward control, speed, and measurable results. The adult world often mirrors the same conditional patterns of childhood. Do more, prove more, earn your right to rest later.
But the problem is, there is no later. The finish line keeps moving because the rule was never about time. It was about identity. Underneath this compulsion lies a primitive anxiety. If I stop, I disappear. That's not an exaggeration. The psyche that was shaped by conditional love experiences stillness as annihilation. It's not laziness that it fears, it's non-existence. This is the invisible root of the guilt. Rest to such a mind feels like disconnection. It reawakens the body's memory of being unseen or unvalued. And the superego, the internalized voice of authority, rushes in to restore order. Get up, keep moving, don't make them think you're nothing. It's tragic, because this inner taskmaster is born from love distorted by fear. Parents or caregivers rarely intend harm. They transmit what they know, that worth must be earned, that rest is luxury, and that busyness equals virtue. And without awareness, those beliefs become inherited architecture, carried, refined, and reinforced by each generation. In analytic psychology, this dynamic represents a split in the psyche, the performer self versus the authentic self. The performer self learns early to anticipate others' expectations and adapt accordingly. It's skilled, efficient, admired. But it's also haunted because every success strengthens the cage. The authentic self, on the other hand, holds the innate desire to exist without condition. It wants to rest not because it's tired, but because it longs to simply be. The tension between these selves creates the modern identity crisis. We become human doings instead of human beings. And the more we chase validation, the farther we drift from wholeness. This isn't just emotional, it's physiological. The body stores these beliefs as patterns of arousal. A nervous system accustomed to constant vigilance can't relax on command. When you try to rest, your body perceives danger, because stillness once meant emotional abandonment. This is why no amount of logical reassurance works. The guilt is not rational. It's somatic. It lives in the body as learned tension. Every time you feel that restlessness while resting, it's not weakness. It's the body remembering the old rule. Stay alert, stay needed, stay relevant. This is where many people get trapped. They mistake the unease for evidence that rest is wrong. So they get up, they go back to work, they chase one more task, and the cycle continues. The relief that follows is not peace. It's avoidance. It's the nervous system calming down only because it returned to the familiar chaos it knows how to survive in. Breaking this cycle requires more than affirmations. It requires awareness, the ability to recognize that guilt, in this case, is not moral, it's mechanical. It's an inherited defense strategy that no longer serves the adult self. This awareness begins by asking uncomfortable questions. What did I have to do to feel loved? What happened when I failed? What was the emotional cost of slowing down? These questions don't blame the past, they illuminate it. They help you see that what you call discipline may actually be fear in disguise. That your exhaustion isn't weakness, it's data. Evidence that a part of you has been over-functioning for decades, trying to secure safety through constant proof. The irony is that the most praised for their drive are often the least at peace with themselves. They've mastered the art of external control but lost touch with internal permission. They can manage time, but not silence. When you've been conditioned to equate love with performance, rest feels like rebellion. Because it is. Rest is the refusal to keep proving what was never in question to begin with. Your right to exist. But rebellion, in this sense, is sacred. It's how we reprogram the blueprint. To rest without guilt is to reparent the inner child, to show them that they are no longer earning love, they are safe enough to receive it. That silence is not punishment, it's nourishment. The adult psyche cannot heal until it stops mistaking hyperproductivity for worthiness. Only then can the performer self relax its grip and make space for authenticity to breathe. Because true productivity, the kind that doesn't destroy you, is born not from fear of failure, but from integration, from being whole. So when guilt surfaces the next time you rest, don't suppress it. Observe it like an old language your body still speaks. It's just the past asking for translation. And once you understand it, you no longer have to obey it.
You're not addicted to productivity. You're addicted to distraction from yourself. It's a harsh truth, but one worth confronting. For many adults, especially those praised for their discipline, their ambition, their relentless work ethic, work has quietly stopped being a means to an end. It's become a shield, a defense mechanism, a way to avoid what lies beneath the surface when the noise fades. This isn't about careers. It's not about success. It's about the emotional role that being busy plays in the architecture of your inner world. The human psyche is a complex organism. It doesn't just want results. It wants protection. It wants control. And when deeper, unresolved pain threatens that control, the psyche will create strategies to contain it, to redirect your awareness away from the discomfort. That strategy is often work. Not because the work itself is meaningful, but because it gives structure to the chaos. It offers rules, deadlines, metrics, tangible markers of progress. In a world where emotions feel vague and unmanageable, productivity gives the illusion of clarity, of stability. But let's be clear, this is not conscious. No one wakes up and says, "Let me bury my childhood trauma under a stack of emails." The psyche is more subtle than that. It will convince you that your value depends on that next achievement, that if you can just check off one more box, you'll finally feel at peace. But the peace never comes. Only another task, another goal, another project. What's happening here is psychological displacement. Instead of confronting the anxiety that sits at the center of the self, the raw, wordless fear that you are not enough, the mind shifts focus to an arena it can dominate: work, tasks, output, control. In analytic terms, this is the ego defending itself against psychic collapse. Work becomes the drug, not because of greed, not because of ambition, but because stillness is unbearable. Why? Because in stillness, the unconscious speaks. And for many, the unconscious is loud. It holds all the content we've suppressed, disowned, and exiled. The unmet needs we were told were too much, the rage we were punished for expressing, the sadness no one had time to notice, the vulnerability that was never safe to reveal. So the mind builds a fortress, schedules, routines, back-to-back meetings, constant stimulation, all of it to prevent one thing: exposure. Exposure to what? To what's real. This is why some people experience acute anxiety when they try to rest.
It's not that they hate relaxation, it's that relaxation strips away the defenses, and without those defenses, the core wounds surface. What you call boredom is often unprocessed grief. What you label as laziness is often emotional fatigue. What you describe as being unmotivated is sometimes just your psyche saying, "I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." But pretending is easier when you're busy, because the world rewards performance. It rarely asks why you need to keep performing. It applauds outcomes, not insight. And so you keep going, even when it hurts, even when your body begins to break down, even when relationships suffer, because stopping feels like unraveling. And in a sense, it is. But unraveling isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's truth emerging. Work, as a defense mechanism, protects the ego from feelings of helplessness. In childhood, when emotional chaos wasn't met with attunement or care, the child learns, if I can't change the environment, I'll control myself. This is the seed of overfunctioning, the origin of hyper-independence, the beginning of internalized pressure to always perform, fix, achieve. It becomes easier to control tasks than to feel helpless, easier to solve problems than to admit you're scared, easier to hustle for worth than to ask for love. But none of that is healing. It's coping. And coping has a limit. Eventually, the defenses crack. The system burns out. The overworked body begins to speak through illness, fatigue, chronic tension. The mind begins to rebel with anxiety, numbness, or depression. The psyche begins to say, I can't keep protecting you from the truth you refuse to feel. This is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because defenses, while useful, are not meant to be permanent. They are scaffolding, not identity. And when work becomes a defense, you lose the ability to rest not just physically, but psychologically. You become trapped in a loop of doing in order to avoid being. But being is where life actually happens. Integration begins when you stop moralizing your exhaustion, when you stop interpreting rest as laziness and start recognizing it as a doorway, an invitation to feel what you've avoided. Sometimes that's sadness, sometimes grief, sometimes an aching loneliness masked by years of performance. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need to abandon ambition. But you do need to ask yourself, honestly, is my work protecting me or connecting me? Because when work is a defense, connection suffers with yourself, with others, with meaning. And without connection, even the most productive life can feel hollow. The truth is, your value was never supposed to depend on how much you can produce. That's a story you inherited, a role you've mastered. But roles can be rewritten, scripts can be burned. And beneath it all, beneath the guilt, the busyness, the compulsion to keep moving, is a self that just wants to be held, seen, accepted. That self isn't earned, it's remembered. So if the silence scares you, that's okay, but don't run from it, because what you find there might not be emptiness. It might be you.
Even after years of success, you still feel like you haven't done enough. You meet every goal. You exceed expectations. People admire you. But inside, there's a pressure you can't quiet, a voice that whispers, you should be doing more. And when you finally sit down to rest, the guilt rushes in like a wave, uninvited, unrelenting. This isn't about ambition anymore. It's about control. More specifically, it's about the part of you that refuses to let go, the inner tyrant that demands more no matter how much you've already given. In psychoanalytic terms, this is the superego, and when it goes unchecked, it becomes a psychological dictator. The superego is formed early in life. It begins as the internalization of parental authority, rules, expectations, moral codes. But it doesn't stop at behavior. It shapes identity. It defines what's good, what's bad, what's acceptable, and what's shameful. But the superego doesn't evolve automatically. It doesn't grow with you. Unless consciously examined, it continues to enforce the old standards you were raised under, whether they were loving, conditional, perfectionistic, or punitive. So even as your life changes, the criteria for enough doesn't. You hit milestones, but feel nothing. You complete projects and immediately feel behind. You finally rest, and the inner critic tightens its grip. Lazy, unworthy, weak. This is the tyranny of the superego. It masquerades as motivation, but it's not trying to help you thrive. It's trying to keep you safe. Based on outdated fears, it believes that if you stop, you'll be rejected. If you fail, you'll be abandoned. So it keeps pushing you to earn your place again and again and again. It uses guilt as a weapon, not to correct behavior, but to maintain control. You see, guilt has a purpose in a healthy psyche. It's supposed to guide moral decision-making, to help us repair and reconnect. But under the rule of a harsh superego, guilt is distorted. It's no longer about harm, it's about inadequacy. You don't feel guilty because you've done something wrong. You feel guilty because you didn't do everything, because you rested, because you felt joy without deserving it. This kind of guilt isn't ethical, it's existential. It comes from the fear that your right to exist is still up for debate. And that fear was often planted in early relationships where love had terms, where care was given when you excelled, withheld when you faltered. So the child inside you learned, be perfect or be punished. Now, as an adult, you don't need the punishment anymore. You've internalized it. The superego becomes the warden of your own mind, and you comply because part of you believes it's protecting you. But here's the reality. This protection comes at a cost, a deep, chronic erosion of your sense of self-worth. Because no matter how much you achieve, it will never be enough for a superego that is wired for deficiency. It doesn't seek fulfillment, it seeks control. It operates through shame, subtle, silent, corrosive shame. You might hear it in thoughts like, you could have done more. Don't get comfortable. You're falling behind. You're only valuable if you produce. These aren't motivators, they're symptoms of a fractured identity, one that has fused your worth to your output. This creates what psychologists call a contingent identity, a self-image entirely dependent on performance. And when rest enters the picture, it threatens that identity. Because rest means letting go. Rest means existing without proving. To a mind ruled by the superego, that's dangerous. Because it exposes the possibility that you are valuable without effort, that you could be worthy without striving. And that truth dismantles the entire structure the superego has built. So it resists, it tightens, it criticizes, it guilts. It says, don't rest, don't pause, don't feel. Because if you do, you might realize you've been living under a false law your entire life. And here's the painful part. The longer you obey that law, the more disconnected you become from your own essence. You begin to believe that the voice of the superego is your own voice,
You lose the ability to distinguish your true needs from your internalized commands. But they are not the same. The superego is not your intuition. It's not your conscience. It's a psychological artifact, a structure built from fear, comparison, and control. And while it may have served a purpose once, it no longer gets to decide what your life is worth. So how do you begin to dismantle its power? First, awareness. You must notice the voice. Separate from it. Hear its tone. Observe its language. Is it urgent? Is it punitive? Is it binary? Good or bad? Success or failure? Then question it. Where did this rule come from? Whose voice is this really? Does this belief actually belong to you, or is it something you were trained to obey? And finally, reclaim your voice. There is a self beneath the superego, a self that knows balance, that seeks truth, not perfection, a self that doesn't view rest as betrayal, but as necessity. That self is quiet, often buried, but not gone. To access it, you must disrupt the pattern. Every time you rest without guilt, you weaken the superego's grip. Every time you honor your limits, you assert your autonomy. Every time you choose presence over performance, you heal the split within. This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Because until you confront the tyranny of the superego, you will never feel free. You will confuse discipline with fear. You will call your coping mechanisms character. And you will live in a cage, convinced it's a fortress. But the door has always been open. You just have to stop asking for permission to walk through it.
What if rest didn't have to be earned? What if your value wasn't measured in effort? What if stopping didn't mean failing? These questions sound simple, but for a mind shaped by conditional worth, they feel dangerous. Because rest, to such a mind, isn't neutral, it's rebellion. And rebellion, even when necessary, comes with fear. Fear that if you stop, everything will fall apart. Fear that you'll lose momentum. Fear that others will think less of you. But most of all, fear that without doing, you'll be nothing. This fear isn't logical, it's embedded. It lives in the nervous system, in the muscle memory of a body trained to equate movement with safety. A body that's been sprinting for decades and has no idea how to stand still. So what does it mean to reclaim permission to rest? It means breaking an inherited pattern. It means challenging not just your behavior, but the beliefs that drive it. It means untangling your worth from your work. And most of all, it means facing the part of you that's terrified of being seen without effort as a shield. Because that's what rest really does. It exposes you, not to failure, to yourself. And for many, that's the hardest confrontation of all. The modern psyche has been structured around external validation. We've learned to see ourselves through output, to define our identity through titles, achievements, accomplishments. We've mistaken exhaustion for excellence. And in so doing, we've lost touch with the truth that rest is not absence, rest is presence. True rest isn't passive, it's restorative. It's the psychological act of choosing to exist without proving. That choice doesn't come easily because the internal systems, the superego, the old emotional contracts, the unexamined fears will resist it. They'll whisper, "You're falling behind, you're wasting time, you haven't earned this." But here's the turning point. You no longer need to listen. Rest is not something the world grants you. It's something you reclaim from within.
not as indulgence, but as integration. Integration is what happens when the fragmented self begins to reunite, when the performer, the protector, the wounded child, and the present adult begin to work together rather than against each other. And integration is impossible without rest, because rest is where the unconscious surfaces. It's where you stop running. It's where old beliefs rise up, not to attack you, but to be seen, understood, and finally released. That's the paradox. Rest feels like a threat, but it's actually the beginning of healing. The more you deny yourself rest, the more you suppress the parts of you that are asking to be heard. Not because you're lazy, but because you're tired of surviving on performance alone. In therapeutic language, reclaiming rest is an act of reparenting. It's showing the internalized child self that love doesn't vanish when you stop trying. It's creating internal safety that doesn't require constant motion. It's whispering, "You are still good, even now, even here, even in silence." And silence is where the truth finally has room to breathe. When you choose to rest, consciously, unapologetically, you interrupt the guilt loop. You show your psyche something new, that rest doesn't bring collapse, it brings clarity. That you can stop and still be held. That you can pause and still be whole. This doesn't mean abandoning goals. It means redefining success. Success that includes stillness. Success that accounts for wholeness. Success that doesn't punish the body for having limits or the soul for needing space. Because without rest, you are not living, you are only continuing. And there is a difference. A life built on endless striving becomes hollow. A life built on conscious rhythm, action and rest, expression and reflection becomes sustainable. So, how do you begin? You start by noticing the guilt, not obeying it. You start by practicing small acts of stillness, even if they make you anxious. You start by refusing to use shame as a motivator. You start by asking, whose voice is this? Whose standards am I still living under? And then, slowly, you replace those voices with your own. The voice that says, I can rest and still be worthy. I can slow down and still be safe. I can stop and still belong. You won't believe it at first. That's expected. You've been trained to believe the opposite. But belief doesn't shift all at once. It shifts through experience. Each time you rest without punishment, you give your psyche new evidence that maybe you are already enough. Not someday, not after the next win, now. This is the quiet revolution, not in what you do, but in what you allow yourself to receive. Rest is not a luxury, it is a psychological necessity. And giving yourself permission to rest without apology, without guilt, is one of the most radical acts of self-trust you will ever commit. So, as this conversation ends, let there be silence. Not emptiness, not avoidance, but space for you to hear what's real. You don't need to earn that space. You just need to stop believing you don't deserve it.